The payroll notification arrives while the train is still underground. No signal, no internet, just the familiar vibration in Ethan Morales' pocket that somehow feels different every other Friday. He smiles before he even unlocks the phone. Around him, nobody notices. A woman continues reading her novel. A teenager keeps staring out the window through his headphones. An elderly man folds yesterday's newspaper into perfect quarters. The train slows into the station. The doors slide open. By the time Ethan reaches the platform, the money already feels real. Not because he spent any of it, because his mind already has. He walks into the morning with a lighter step than he had 20 minutes earlier. Nothing about his salary changed overnight. The number is exactly what he expected, yet the day somehow feels larger. The coffee shop near the office is unusually busy. He joins the line anyway. Normally, he'd make coffee at work. Today, the caramel latte suddenly sounds reasonable. When the barista asks if he'd like breakfast too, he hesitates for less than a second. Sure. The sandwich costs almost as much as the coffee. He taps his card without looking at the screen. The receipt lands beside the cup. He leaves it behind. 3 blocks away, another payroll notification lights up a different phone. Ava Bennett sees it while waiting for the pedestrian crossing. She earns almost the same salary as Ethan. Their desks are on the same floor. Their birthdays are only 2 months apart. If you compared their tax forms, you'd struggle to tell them apart. She smiles too. Then she opens a different app. A transfer happens before she reaches the other side of the street. The money disappears from her checking account almost as quickly as it arrived. No celebration, no satisfaction, just one automatic instruction she set up almost a year ago. By the time she enters the office, she's already forgotten it happened. Neither of them talks about payday. People rarely do. They talk about weekends, lunch plans, traffic, the weather. Money is one of the few things almost everyone is thinking about while pretending they aren't. At 11:30, someone suggests ordering lunch for the team. Ethan says yes before hearing the menu. Ava walks over with everyone else. She orders too. The difference isn't the meal. It's that she already knows exactly how much spending money remains for the next 2 weeks. Not because she's calculating, because the decision was made before breakfast. After work, Ethan stops at a home goods store to replace a desk lamp. The old one still works. It just leans slightly to one side. Inside the store, the lamp takes less than 2 minutes. The next 40 minutes disappear somewhere between shelves. Throw pillows, a scented candle, a storage basket, a small plant. Nothing costs enough to trigger hesitation. Each item quietly answers the same sentence. I'm already here. The cashier bags everything together. Walking back to the car, Ethan feels oddly productive. His apartment will look better tonight. It does, for about 3 days. By the following Wednesday, the candle has blended into the room. The basket has become invisible. The plant is simply another object occupying the corner. Only the bank balance remembers they were ever new. Ava spends that same evening differently. She isn't budgeting. She isn't studying finance. She isn't reading investment books. She's sitting on her balcony with leftovers and a library novel while her phone updates software inside the apartment. The evening costs almost nothing. Not because she's trying to save money, because nothing she's doing asks her to spend it. The strange thing about payday isn't that people spend. People always spend. The strange thing is how quickly the brain begins treating fresh income like old income. By Saturday morning, Ethan no longer feels like someone who was just paid. He feels like someone with money available. Though sound identical, they aren't. He meets his younger brother Lucas for breakfast. Lucas is saving for his first apartment. Halfway through the meal, he says something Ethan barely notices. I leave my paycheck alone for 1 day before I touch it. Ethan laughs. What difference does 1 day make? Lucas shrugs. It reminds me the money is real before I decide where it goes. The conversation moves on. Sports. Their mother's birthday. Vacation plans. The sentence stays behind. Not because Ethan agrees with it, because he doesn't. On Sunday afternoon, Ava visits her grandfather, Harold. Retirement has made him slower, but somehow less hurried. He waters tomato plants one by one before sitting beside her on the porch. Without mentioning money, he asks a question. When do you feel richest? She smiles. Payday. He nods as though he'd expected that answer. When do you usually spend the most? She thinks about it. Probably the same day. He doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he pours tea into 2 mismatched mugs. When I was your age, he says quietly, I thought the paycheck changed my finances. He looks across the yard. It mostly changed my emotions. Ava turns the mug slowly in her hands. She doesn't answer, not because she disagrees, because she'd never separated the two. Monday arrives. The office feels exactly like every other Monday. The projects haven't changed. The deadlines haven't moved. Only one invisible thing is different. The excitement of payday has almost completely evaporated. Ethan opens his banking app while waiting for a meeting to begin. He isn't checking a bill. He isn't transferring money. He just wants to know where he stands. He scrolls through the weekend. Coffee, breakfast, the home goods store, streaming renewal, gas, groceries. Nothing unusual, nothing reckless, nothing that would make an interesting story on its own. He reaches the bottom of the list, then scrolls back to the top. A strange thought crosses his mind. He remembers making every purchase. He doesn't remember making that many decisions, and that difference is much larger than it first appears. If this is the kind of financial thinking you've been looking for, subscribe to TED Wealth Theory if you haven't already, and if you're enjoying the journey so far, leaving a like helps more people discover these insights before they become expensive lessons. Because sometimes the biggest financial decisions are the ones that never feel like decisions at all. Now back to Ethan. He slips the phone back into his pocket just as the meeting begins. Numbers fill the conference room. Quarterly targets, client retention, operating costs. Everyone is discussing money. No one is discussing the kind that quietly leaves their own accounts. The meeting ends an hour later. As people gather their laptops, Ethan notices Melissa from payroll standing outside the conference room waiting to speak with his manager. She's been processing salaries for nearly 15 years, hundreds of paychecks every month, thousands every year. She smiles as he walks past. Busy morning, she laughs. The day after payday always is. What makes it busier? You'd be surprised how many people suddenly remember deductions, retirement plans, or savings after they've already spent part of the paycheck. She says it casually, like someone commenting on the weather. Then she disappears into the office. The sentence stays with Ethan longer than he expects. Tuesday evening arrives with heavy rain. Traffic crawls. His windshield wipers move faster than the cars around him. His phone buzzes at a red light. A flash sale. Today only. 40% off. He isn't looking for anything. Yet by the time he reaches home, 3 tabs are open on his laptop. The discount feels like an opportunity until he asks himself a question he has never asked before. What problem am I trying to solve? The cursor stops moving. He closes the browser, not because he suddenly became disciplined, because he can't find an answer. Across town, Ava finishes dinner and opens a notebook. Not to record every expense. She tried that once. It lasted 12 days. Instead, she writes only one sentence. What made me spend money today? Sometimes the answer is hunger, sometimes convenience, sometimes genuine need. Tonight, she writes one word: boredom. She closes the notebook. Nothing else. No calculations. No guilt. Just one honest observation. 3 weeks later, the notebook contains 21 words. One for each day. Patterns begin appearing before totals ever do. Stress, celebration, fatigue, impatience, reward, loneliness. None of them appear on a bank statement, yet every transaction seems connected to one of them. The money wasn't making decisions. The emotions were. By the middle of the month, Ethan notices something odd. The expensive purchases aren't the problem. They almost never are. He remembers buying the desk lamp. He remembers replacing his running shoes. He remembers paying for the dentist. The forgotten spending lives somewhere else. Another coffee because the morning felt long. A snack during the drive home. Parking closer instead of walking 3 blocks. An app subscription that solved a problem for exactly 2 weeks. The amounts are forgettable, which is exactly why they survive unnoticed. One Thursday afternoon, his team celebrates landing a new client. Someone orders desserts. Another person suggests drinks after work. No one wants to be the first person to say no. Ethan goes with them. The evening is enjoyable. The bill isn't outrageous. On the drive home, he realizes something uncomfortable. If the celebration had happened during the last week before payday, he probably would have declined. Not because the restaurant changed, because his perception of affordability had. His income hadn't moved in 2 weeks. Only the feeling attached to it had. That realization follows him home. Saturday morning, he decides to conduct a small experiment. Nothing dramatic. No budgeting challenge, no spending freeze. He labels every purchase over the next month before making it. Only one label: need, convenience, impulse, investment. That's it. No complicated categories, no spreadsheets, just one word before tapping his card. The first purchase is fuel, need. The second is lunch with Lucas, convenience. The third is a portable speaker he notices while buying groceries. His hand reaches for it automatically. Then he pauses. Which label fits? Need? No. Investment? Definitely not. Convenience? Not really. Only one remains. Impulse. He places the speaker back on the shelf, not because it was expensive, because giving it a name somehow removed its disguise. Meanwhile, Ava's automatic investment quietly executes on another payday. She almost misses the notification. Months ago, she would have opened the app immediately. Now she simply locks her phone. The money has already been assigned a job. There's nothing left to negotiate. That evening, she meets her friend Naomi for dinner. Naomi has just received a raise. 20%. She's glowing. I finally feel like I can breathe. Ava smiles. I remember that feeling. Naomi laughs. I'm replacing my laptop this weekend. And after that, I don't know. A vacation, maybe. What about you? Ava thinks for a second. I don't really spend raises anymore. Naomi looks puzzled. What do you mean? I try to let my lifestyle keep believing I earn yesterday's salary. Naomi stares at her. That sounds impossible. Ava smiles. It felt impossible the first time. Then she changes the subject, not because she's hiding anything, because she remembers how strange the idea sounded the first time she heard it herself. Weeks become months. The differences between Ethan and Ava remain almost invisible. They still work in the same building. They still earn similar salaries. They still complain about traffic, still laugh at the same office jokes, still order lunch on birthdays. If someone watched them for a day, they'd conclude their financial lives were identical. They wouldn't be entirely wrong. The gap isn't visible during the day. It grows quietly after the decisions everyone forgets making. And that's precisely why almost nobody notices it until years have already passed. One Friday afternoon, the elevators stop on every floor. People file in and out carrying backpacks, laptop bags, and weekend plans. Someone mentions a concert. Someone else talks about replacing a washing machine. By the time the doors open on the lobby, everyone has mentally spent at least part of their paycheck. No one says it out loud. They don't have to. The parking garage empties faster than usual. Across the city, restaurants begin filling. Shopping carts grow heavier. Delivery drivers become busier. The economy has its own rhythm. Payday is one of its loudest heartbeats. Ethan stops at an electronics store on the way home. He's only there to buy a charging cable. 5 minutes later, he's comparing wireless earbuds. His current pair still works. The battery doesn't last quite as long. One ear occasionally disconnects. Nothing urgent. The display card reads, "Upgrade your everyday experience." He smiles. It's a clever sentence. It doesn't promise happiness. It promises a slightly better version of ordinary life. That feels much easier to justify. He buys them. Walking back to the car, something unexpected happens. He doesn't feel excited. He feels finished, as if the purchase closed a small mental tab that had been left open. By Sunday evening, the feeling is gone. The earbuds are simply his earbuds now. They've already become ordinary. Ava spends the same weekend helping her grandfather repair an old wooden fence. Halfway through the afternoon, Harold reaches into a rusted toolbox. Most of the tools are older than Ava. One hammer has a smooth wooden handle polished by decades of use. She laughs. Why don't you just buy a new one? He turns the hammer over in his hands. Because this one still knows its job. She smiles. So do the new ones. He nods. They do. But every time I replace something that still works, I teach myself that satisfaction has an expiration date. The sentence lands quietly. Neither of them speaks for several seconds. Harold taps one nail into the fence, then another. The strange thing about comfort, he says, is that it keeps moving. On the drive home, Ava can't stop thinking about that sentence. Comfort keeps moving. Maybe that's why raises never seem to last. Maybe that's why promotions feel permanent for only a few weeks. Maybe the finish line isn't running away. Maybe she's carrying it with her. Monday morning begins with an email. Annual salary reviews. The office buzzes before anyone has opened the attachment. By lunchtime, everyone knows roughly where they stand. Some celebrate, some complain, some immediately begin calculating what the increase means. Ethan receives a raise. Not enormous, not disappointing, enough to notice. His first thought isn't about investing. It isn't about paying down debt. It isn't even about saving. Bang! It's about moving to the newer apartment building across town, the one with the rooftop gym. He catches himself halfway through the thought. Nothing about his current apartment became worse. The raise simply made a different life feel closer. Later that afternoon, Ava receives almost the same increase. She smiles, closes the email, returns to work. Not because she doesn't appreciate it, because she'd already decided months ago where every future raise would go. The decision isn't made today. Today is merely the day the plan becomes visible. That evening, Ethan and Ava leave the office together. The traffic light outside headquarters takes unusually long to change. They wait in silence. Ethan finally speaks. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever feel like your paycheck disappears faster now than it used to?" She laughs softly. "I used to." "What changed?" "I stopped treating payday like permission." The light turns green. They begin crossing. "I don't understand." "I didn't either." She looks ahead instead of at him. "I realized I wasn't spending more because I earned more. I was spending more because getting paid made me feel temporarily wealthier." They reach the opposite sidewalk. Cars continue flowing behind them. The feeling lasted a few days. She smiles. The purchases lasted much longer. Ethan doesn't answer immediately. For the first time, he isn't thinking about his bank account. He's thinking about his behavior. That distinction changes everything, because what Ava has just described has a name. Psychologists call it the paycheck illusion. When fresh income arrives, the brain temporarily relaxes its sense of scarcity. Future expenses suddenly feel distant. Small purchases seem easier to justify. Decisions that would feel unnecessary 2 weeks later become perfectly reasonable today. The paycheck didn't increase spending power as much as it increased the feeling of spending power. And feelings are remarkably expensive when they quietly become habits. If you've ever looked at your account a week after payday and wondered where the money went, even though you can't point to a single reckless purchase, you're seeing the paycheck illusion in action. If these kinds of hidden financial patterns are helping you recognize your own habits, subscribe to TED Wealth Theory. Every week, we break down the invisible behaviors that quietly shape people's financial lives, so you can spot them before they become costly. Ethan spends the rest of the walk home replaying the past 6 months, not the balances, the moments, the coffees, the upgrades, the celebrations, the discounts, the convenience. Individually, none of them worried him. Together, they told a story he had never bothered to read. The following Friday, another payroll notification arrives. Same train, same vibration, same amount. Nothing about the deposit has changed. Everything about Ethan's response has. Before buying coffee, before opening a shopping app, before making a single decision, he opens a note on his phone and writes one question. "Would I still buy this 3 days from now?" Then he locks the screen. The question costs nothing, but over the months that follow, it quietly becomes the most profitable habit he's ever built, because the paycheck was never the problem. The illusion was. And once you learn to separate the feeling of being richer from actually becoming wealthier, every payday begins working for your future instead of borrowing from it. If today's lesson changed the way you think about payday, the next question is just as important. What happens when your income actually increases? I covered that in another episode called You Got a Raise. So why are you still broke? Watch that next, because earning more doesn't automatically build wealth. And for most people, it quietly creates a whole new set of financial habits. And keep an eye out for our next episode. It starts with 2 neighbors living on the same street who seem to be on completely different financial paths. But as their lives unfold over the years, you'll discover that building wealth is very different from what most people think. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.